Oh, really?
Vampire! We take your candy!
Count Dracula.
I am Dracula. And I bid you welcome, Mr. Hunt, to my house. Come in.
Our first award goes to the vampire for most blood drained in a single evening.
The strength of the vampire is that people will not believe in him.
Hello, YouTube. Good evening. It's been a week. Can you believe it? It's been a whole week. I hope you had a great week. I hope wherever you're at, the weather is very nice. I'm not going to talk about the weather we're having here. I don't want to talk about it. It's too depressing. So, Juliet is at my feet. I have warmed up the basement and now have turned off the heater. The cat is locked upstairs. I've tested my microphone. I've played around with the camera, so hopefully it will stay focused on me. You see my new background here, which I'm obsessed with. My tea is made and it is time to do this. Let's do this. Good evening, my fellow vampire lovers. The sun is going down and you know what that means. It's time for me to record another episode of my podcast, The Beautiful Dead. As always, I am your host, Lena Nazari. If you want to reach out to me, go to lenanazari.com. It has links to my social media, ways to contact me. Email, that's lena@lenanazari.com. Join my street team, my fanged family, whatever. If this is the first time you're listening to this, then you've never heard this, but most of you have heard this a lot, so you know how to get a hold of me. And so you know, if you reach out to me, I do actually respond. It might take some time to respond, but if you get a response, when you get a response, that is me. So remember, kind of busy, but I will get back to you at some point in time. If you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, the podcast, make sure you turn on notifications. Please comment. It really makes a huge difference for the podcast, for the YouTube channel especially. It makes a huge difference. If you are somebody who goes on TikTok, go check out TikTok. Having a blast there, teaching people all about random vampire facts, talking about vampires that hit the news. We're having a blast. If you're on YouTube, you're seeing my new cool background piece here. I had it last week, but I hadn't turned it on yet, so now it's turned on and ready to go. If you're just listening to the podcast, well, go check out the YouTube channel so you can see what I'm talking about. The third book, it's going to be out. It's going to be out so soon. I can't even believe it. Don't have a release date, or if I do, I haven't announced it officially yet. Just my street team and my fanged family know. So if you want to follow that, you want to know when it's coming out, you can either just keep watching these videos until I announce it. You can watch my social media, or you can join my fanged family. If you haven't, you need to read the first and second book so you can be ready for the third one. I'm very proud of it. I'm very excited for people to read it. It's been very hard to keep secrets, and I'm so excited for it to come out so that we can all talk about what happens. All right, let's get into this. So this week, the vampire tea I have chosen, I think, is very appropriate for this. And what I've chosen is Brides of the Damned. Yes, Brides of the Damned. That label is so stinking cute. I'm obsessed with it. So it's perfect for this. But also, for those of you who don't know, I'm working with a nutrition coach, and she has challenged me to work on getting my cortisol levels down, and one of that is taking in antioxidants. So most of these vampire teas have a ton of antioxidants, but that's one of the reasons I chose this one. It has very high antioxidants. And this one is green tea with succulent apricots, delicious white nectarines, and effervescent cranberries to send a shiver of delight up your spine. I'll take a shiver up my spine. So let's check this out. All right. Oh. Okay, so I love green tea. This is so, so good. I think I'm probably gonna have a couple cups of this tonight. This is so good. Oh my gosh, I love this. I'm gonna put a link in the, I always put links in the YouTube video descriptions, but sometimes I forget to tell you guys that, so go check it out. Brides of the Damned. Yum. Okay. Let's talk about fearless vampire killers. Okay, for those of you who don't, this is the first time you've listened to the podcast, huge spoiler alerts. I ruin everything. Who hooks up with who kills who, how they die, who cheats on who, everything. I tell you everything, so be prepared. If you've never seen Fearless Vampire Killers and you just want to follow along, that's fine. Let's do a little summary. Okay. This film is set deep in the heart of Transylvania, and the story appears to take place sometime during the mid-19th century. Professor Abronsius, formerly of the University of Königsberg, and his apprentice Alfred are on the way to hunt vampires. Abronsius is old and withering and barely able to survive the cold ride through the wintry forests, while Alfred is bumbling and introverted. The two hunters come across a small village seemingly at the end of a long search for signs of vampires. The two stay at a local inn full of angst-ridden townspeople who perform strange rituals to fend off an unseen evil. While staying in the inn, Alfred develops a fondness for Sarah, the overprotected daughter of the tavern keeper, Yoin. That's going to be a tough one. Whew. Chagall is his last name. Let's call him Chagall. Alfred witnesses Sarah being kidnapped by the local vampire lord Count von Krolock. Crazed with grief and armed with only a bunch of garlic, Chagall attempts to rescue her but does not get very far before he is captured, drained of his blood, and vampirized. It's the first time I've heard the word vampirized. After Chagall rises and attacks Magda, the tavern's beautiful maidservant and the object of his lust when he was still human, Abronsius and Alfred follow his trail in the snow, which leads them to Krolock's ominous castle in the snow-blanketed hills nearby. They break into the castle but are trapped by the Count's hunchbacked servant, Calcol. I am gonna trip over these words. Calcol. Ooh, they are taken to see the Count, who affects an air of aristocratic dignity while questioning Abronsius about why he has come to the castle. They also encounter the Count's son, the foppish Herbert. Meanwhile, Chagall, no longer caring about his daughter's fate, sets up his plan to turn Magda into his vampire bride, which is why I chose this tea. Lots of brides in this. Despite misgivings, Abronsius and Alfred accept the Count's invitation to stay in his ramshackle Gothic castle. I would not describe it as ramshackle, but whatever, where Alfred spends the night fitfully. The next morning, Abronsius plans to find the castle crypt and destroy the Count by staking him in the heart, seemingly forgetting about the fate of Sarah. The crypt is guarded by the hunchback, so after some wandering, they attempt to climb in through a roof window. However, Abronsius gets stuck in the aperture, and it falls to Alfred to complete the task of killing the Count in his slumber. At the last moment, his nerve fails him, and he cannot accomplish the deed. Alfred then has to go back to free Abronsius, but on the way, he comes upon Sarah having a bath in her room. Because why not have a random bath scene? She seems oblivious to her danger when he pleads for her to come away with him, and informs him that a ball is set to take place this very night. After briefly taking his eyes off of her, Alfred turns to find Sarah has vanished into thin air. After freeing Abronsius, who is half frozen, they re-enter the castle. Alfred again seeks Sarah, but meets Herbert instead, who first attempts to seduce him, and then, after Alfred realizes Herbert's reflection does not show up in the mirror, reveals his vampire nature and attempts to bite him. Abronsius and Alfred flee from Herbert through a dark stairway to safety, only to be trapped behind a locked door and a turret. As night is falling, they become horrified witnesses as the graves below open up to reveal a huge number of vampires of various past centuries at the castle, who hibernate and meet once a year only to feast upon any captives that the Count has provided for them. The Count appears, mocking them, and tells them their fate is sealed. He leaves them to attend the ball, where Sarah will be presented as the next vampire victim. The hunters escape by firing a cannon at the door, substituting steam pressure for gunpowder, and come to the ball in disguise, where, although exposed by their reflections in a huge mirror, they are able to grab Sarah and escape. Fleeing in a horse-drawn sleigh, Abronsius and Alfred are unaware that it is too late for Sarah, as she awakens in mid-flight as a vampire and bites Alfred, thus allowing vampires to be released into the world. That was a mouthful. I knew I was going to struggle with some of those names, and whoever wrote that summary wanted to shove in as many big words as possible, but I think it did okay. And you know what, podcast, I'm not going to edit out the parts where I stumbled because it's fine. It's all fine. Okay. So, some trivia. For those of you who are true crime buffs, Sarah Tate, wife of the director Roman Polanski, who is in this, she plays Sarah, was one of the victims of the Charles Manson cult killings. Very sad story. Very sad story. So for those of you who didn't know that, yeah, Sharon Tate was one of the Manson murder victims. Okay, let's break it down. There's no vampire crossovers, by the way. Nobody else in this movie is ever in another vampire movie. Relationship to humans. The vampires are known to the villagers. So this is old school village, Transylvanian village. These villagers are raised on stories of vampires. They very quickly recognize who's a vampire. There's no hiding. Like, everybody knows that vampires are up in the castle. They do everything they can to protect themselves from the vampires. The vampires, of course, show up every once in a while to feed on and kidnap humans. I mean, you gotta do what you gotta do, right? Okay. Appearance. The vampires are human appearing. However, they are pale with almost like a gray hue to them, but not always. This actually might be just a mistake in the makeup or the filter. The grayish hue changes throughout the film. So when we first see the Count grabbing Sarah, he is that sort of grayish color, but then we see him in the castle, his skin is closer to normal, and his son is even closer to a human hue. So either this is just a mistake, or maybe it's various levels of feeding. Maybe it depends on whether or not they've fed. They're very gothically dressed. The Count is dressed in a black cape with the red satin lining for the ball. Now at the ball, we see dozens of vampires, and some of them look real bad, like Revenant bad. But like I said, they're sleeping in the ground for a year, so maybe it's going too long without feeding and they start to decay. I don't know. Or maybe there's different types of vampires in this. Like, maybe there's different breeds and classes of vampires in this. All I know is they vary in how they look, and when I say they vary, I mean like in stages of decay. So, fangs. The fangs also vary. Some have 2 sharp retractable canines on each side. Some have 1 small fang on each side, while some have 2 fangs on each side. The Count only has the 2 fangs, but they are longer and sharper, and they're curved at the edge more than the other vampires we see. Maybe that has to do with, like, I don't know, maybe he's a certain level of power. Maybe as you grow with power and age, your fangs grow. And the fangs are all retractable. They come and go as needed. So sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. Blood. It is an all-blood diet for these vampires. Like I said, I think that the appearance and the level of decay has to do with feeding. So I guess the better fed you are, the more human you look. That's what I'm going to go with on this one. Food. Vampires are repelled by garlic in this world, so very old school. We see lots of strands of cloves of garlic everywhere. Garlic is mentioned, garlic around the neck to try and protect the women. The huge. Sunlight. Again, classic, old school. These vampires cannot go in the sunlight. They're not going to sparkle. They're just going to burst into flames. Sleep. These are OG vampires. They sleep in coffins and crypts and in the ground. End of story. We do get to see right before the ball, we get to see them climb up out of the ground, and then we see this aerial shot of these old vampires like milling around and coming together in the graveyard. So it's kind of a cool scene. Holy items. There is a hilarious scene where the newly turned Chagall climbs into the maid's room and she pulls out a cross, and because he's Jewish, he goes, "You've got the wrong vampire." That made me laugh. So in this world, the vampire is repelled by the symbol of their religion. So if you have a vampire who's an atheist, grab the garlic, because none of the holy items are going to work for you. Rules. Really the only rule is they can't be seen in mirrors. We never see we know that they can enter unannounced because he goes and steals Sarah. Uninvited. They can enter uninvited because he steals Sarah. They never address the can they cross running water? Do they have to stop and count seeds? Like none of that is ever addressed. These are old school vampires, so I would be willing to bet they can't cross the water, but it's never addressed, so that's completely an assumption on my part. Powers. We see one of the vampires scale a wall very easily. Again, that's a classic vampire power. It's implied that they have an affinity with wolves and bats. The Count mentions that. They aren't stronger than humans because we see a wrestling match between a hunter and a vampire, and this is not like a particularly strong hunter either, so clearly they don't have superhuman strength. The hunter bites the vamp's ear and he pulls back in pain, so clearly they have the same pain receptors as humans. Plus they don't have any kind of extraordinary senses, and not just that, but there's one in the ball that's actually hard of hearing because the hunters are talking to each other while they're dancing in the ball, surrounded by vampires. They're whispering to each other what their plans are, and none of the vamps hear it. So not only do they not have heightened senses, but actually their hearing is probably worse than a human's, because some human that's dancing right next to them is going to hear them talking about escaping. Also, I don't know if they live forever because some of them look really bad and really old. So either these were turned later in life, or these vampires age, or maybe, they sleep in the coffin for a year, and then once they've fed, they go back, and I don't know. The Count also is older, so I don't know. We're going to move on from that one. How are they made? We see a girl fed on several times and not turned until after she is dead. And we just see one turned after the first attack, but it is mentioned that he's drained completely on this attack. So it's not just a bite. So it's not like Dracula where you get bitten 3 times and then he drains you and all that jazz. Or like we saw in Subspecies, over the course of several nights. I think it just has to do with them draining you completely. And if they drain you completely, then you come back. But we never see them drink a vampire's blood or anything, so we don't know if that's part of the embrace. I don't know, I'm sorry. Oh, and also we see that the Count has a son who's a vampire, and he's a young adult. I want to say he's probably in his late 20s, early 30s, but it's never clarified. Was he born as a vampire and grew to a certain age and then stopped aging, or did he have a human son and then when the son grew into adulthood the Count turned him? I don't know, because again, never mentioned. I don't think they ever expected somebody to pick this apart. Probably Heartbeat and breathing. This is actually never addressed, but since these are old school vampires, and we've got the garlic thing and the cross thing and the sleeping in coffins thing, I'm gonna guess no breathing and no heartbeat. I mean, that's my guess as the expert. So we're gonna move on. Are they good or are they bad? The vampires are the bad guys in this story. You know that I'm on the vampire's side. You know I always love the vampire. I'm just reporting the facts here. In this particular thing, the vampires are the villain. It is what it is. Tropes I love and tropes I hate. So this movie is full of tropes, full of them. I love the vampire ball trope. I love that one. Any kind of big vampire get together, I just love it. That was beautifully done in Van Helsing with Hugh Jackman. We saw a beautiful vampire ball in that one. And we see like a lot of vampire gatherings and What We Do in the Shadows. And I even have one in my own book. I just love that. I love the idea of like a big vampire get together. Tropes I hate. Not a fan of just needing a bite and then to die in order to turn. It's a lot of work to have to decapitate, stake, and or burn everybody you feed off of. So that would be like a real bummer if every time you fed and happened to kill somebody, you then had to destroy the corpse. These vampires don't have mesmerization, so it's not like they can feed a little bit and then make you forget that it even happened like we see in Vampire Diaries. That's super handy. Personally, I like the full embrace for the turn to happen. I like the vamps to be able to feed and then make you forget they ever fed on you. That is not the case in this one. So, ratings. Everybody's favorite. People love the ratings, and I love that you love the ratings, and that is why I take it so seriously. How scary or evil are the vampires of Fearless Vampire Killers? So, of course, you have to remember, this is a comedy, so the vampires are very comedic, they're over the top. But let's go ahead and look at this objectively. They are bound by the sun. They aren't stronger or faster than humans. They don't have the power to wipe your memories or control you. They commune with the creatures of the night, but they can't like shift or anything. They can scale walls, but if you just pull out garlic or a holy item, then you're good to go. So if you just hang garlic in your room before you go to bed, they can scale the wall all they want, climb in your window. They're gonna pop right back out when they see that garlic. Now, there does seem to be a good number of them, but until the girl gets out, they all seem to be trapped in Transylvania. But they do steal girls right out of their bed, which is very naughty. And they have no problem like offering up this young girl for sacrifice, which is not nice. So all in all, 3 out of 10 stakes to the heart for how evil or scary they are. I mean, these are not the worst vampires to come across if you're a human. If you have garlic or you have a cross or you have a Star of David or whatever your religious icon is, or even just bite them in the ear, you could scare them off. So they're really not that scary. How sexy or alluring are the vampires of Fearless Vampire Killers? So you know, one of the things I always look at is, are these vampires even interested in sex? Because that's something you have to take into account. If they don't want to have sex, then it's not, it doesn't really matter how drawn you are to them or how attracted you are to them. So we know that the vampires in this are interested in sex because Sarah's dad is harassing the crap out of this poor barmaid. It's awful. The Count's son tries to seduce one of the hunters, which is very funny. And I love that they call him foppish. That being said, they don't have any kind of special allure. Most of them look like they're actually rotting and are senior citizens. So even though the Count isn't particularly sexy, it's not common, but this does happen where they get a low scare score and a low sex score, and this is one of those times. They get the honorary vamp point, and they do want sex, you know, plus the Count does have a castle, so you know, perks, but that's really about it. So 2 out of 10 onks for sexiness and allure, and that extra point on top of the one is because of the count. Everybody else, oof, yikes. And that Sarah's dad, ooh, yay. All right, my thoughts. So for those of you who were around at this time, do you remember when you would turn on the TV at night and you would start to watch a movie just a couple minutes in, so you had missed the title card, but it was early enough, you looked and you're like, well, it's only 2 minutes past the hour, so I haven't missed too much. So you sit down, you watch this whole movie, but you don't know the name of it, you're not really sure what you watched. If you didn't have a TV guide in the house, there was no way to look up what it was. And then these movies or TV shows kind of become like a fever dream in the back of your head. You know, at some point in time you watched a movie like this, but you weren't totally sure what it was. This movie is one of those for me. I watched it, I was young. I watched it one night, and for the rest of time was like, what was that movie I watched? There was portions of it in my brain. So when I turned it on, I was like, oh, this is that movie that I watched. It shows up on a lot of the greatest vampire movies of all time lists. It shows up on the like vampire movies you must watch, all of that. It pops up a lot. And I will be honest, I bet when it came out, it was like a real hit. However, it would never be made now. They would never make it now. It is not politically correct. That's all I'm gonna say. It's campy, it's silly. The young women are extremely sexualized in this. They're played like, you know, boobs and hair, but no brain. So that, I guess, that was just the sign of the times. If you've ever wondered, like, what are some movies that I must watch if I'm gonna call myself a vampire fan? I see this in the horror community a lot. They're like, well, if you haven't seen these 20 films, you're not a horror fan. If you're one of those, it's like, what are the must-see vampire films? This is one of them, for sure. It is a movie, I think, that shaped the way vampires, I think, some of the tropes we know today came from these type of movies, you know, came from the Hammer films, came from a film like this. And it's fun to watch. You really have to like ignore some of the stuff in there, because again, it was just the times, it just was the way it was. This is one to watch for sure. I had fun rewatching it for the podcast. That being said, I don't think I will ever watch it again. Not because it was particularly horrible. It wasn't horrible. It's fun, and it's definitely a must-watch for vampire fans. But to watch it and know that this is the movie where Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski would meet and fall in love, which set the dominoes into motion, which ended just horribly for Sharon Tate. It was very hard to separate my knowledge of that from this movie. So I watched it for the podcast. I now get to connect a title to the fever dream of this show that I watched, or movie that I watched when I was young. So now I know what that was that I watched, but I never want to watch it again. It was just, but let's get away from that, because that's terrible. It's absolutely horrible, and I can't even imagine. I have good news. So I have Shadow of the Vampire. We have this store in Pittsburgh called The Exchange, and they can track down anything for you. They tracked it down for me on DVD. I have it. It's right here. I am going to do it. So I'm going to watch it, and we are finally going to talk about it next week. I'm really excited. It's very, very rare for a horror film, specifically a vampire film, to get the attention of the Academy and get nominated for an Oscar. It's rare. There's a few of them out there, and this is one of them. So I'm very excited. I haven't watched it since it came out, so I'm excited to go back and watch it. I'm gonna pull out my DVD player, I'm gonna pop some popcorn, and I'm gonna watch it, and I cannot wait to talk about it next week. So I hope you're gonna come back. If you wanna watch it, and you don't have it on DVD, I'm sorry, it's not streaming anywhere. If I could, I would give my DVD to you and you could watch it, but start asking all your friends, especially the ones who are horror fans and have that wall of DVDs. We all know that person. Ask them if they have it. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I love you all very much. I hope you're having a wonderful week and, you know, are happy and feel loved. And I am excited that we are finally in spring because I am done with winter. So I am going to go watch my movie. I wish you all wicked hugs and a bloody kisses. Good evening. All right. I really meant that. I'm going to wrap this up, okay? I'm going to go. I'm going to get editing done, and then I'm going to put on some comfy PJs and pull out my DVD player, and I'm going to watch Shadow of a Vampire. So join me here next week. We'll do the same thing. Subscribe, click notifications, comment, please, please. Even if you just comment vampire, comment. It helps the video so much. Thank you. And I'm going to move on. I love you guys. Let me know what you think of my new sign here. I'm obsessed with it. I'm going to try and take it to cons with me and put it on my booth, but I have to read the rules. I don't know if I'm going to be allowed to or not, but if I am, I'll be taking pictures and posting them on social media, so make sure you're following me. And I'm going to finish off this Brides of the Damned, and definitely I'm going to make a second cup to take with me to watch this movie. So I love you guys. I wish you wicked hugs and bloody kisses. Good evening.